Arun, you have been with PruTAN and you have been bringing in a lot of innovations in the area of payments. Can you just give a small description about what PruTAN is actually and what kind of revolutionary innovation have you brought into the world of payments?
Sure. I've been a product developer in the past, developing automation products. I've been engaged with PruTAN for nearly about a year, and this is about payment assurance. So we heard a lot about sensitivity, in using agentic AI or AI in general, for the purpose of moving money, right? But payments assurance is a place. It's a place where we can really benefit from the use of AI, right? It's a productivity improvement space. So what PruTAN has actually done is actually to bring the business intelligence in the payment space, right, and then try to offer that as a product, wherein it actually addresses some of the critical pain points that is there, for the banks and fintechs. Today, that space is really fragmented. You don't have like a one-stop solution wherein you can actually use like one single solution to actually do your entire payments validations, right? And then it lacks the business intelligence. You're more relying on subject matter experts, different kinds of generic tools to actually build that validation, right? So that's where actually you can think about where AI can actually come in, right? And then help you build that validations. Then you might think about, okay, AI, it is not very specific, it is probabilistic, right? How can you really trust, such a system, right, to do your validations, right? So that's where, we thought about innovating, right? And then bring in some determinism in the agents, right? Today, we are all thinking about LLM, right? But before the LLM era started, right, there was the symbolic AI that was in place, which actually provided more determinism in the AI space, right? To use that, right, to think about the validations that you have to do for your acquirers, the processes, the network switching, right, all these aspects, to actually rely on, a technology that can actually that you can actually trust, right, that you can depend on, right? So thinking out of the box, right, like here everyone is talking and scared about AI. How am I going to use AI for my validations, right? And to bring that in the different aspects of payments assurance, starting from the point of sale through to as the money moves, from the acquirers, the processes to the banks.
So how is your product intelligently bringing in the AI into the ecosystem there?
Yeah. So when it comes to the assurance of payments, and payments is such a vast space. Let's just look at Canadian context here. What are we dealing with here, right? It is the RTR, right? And then there is open banking coming into space, and then digital currencies soon to get into space, right? How are you going to actually deal with it, right? There is this traditional ledger-based systems that your banks are dealing with today, right? And what kind of systems are you going to actually put in place in order to validate when these new technologies are going to come, right? We're talking about ISO 20122 migration. So it's a big, complicated task, right? And a lot of the banks are in line today, right? So and we are dealing with how your transactions actually flow from the traditional 8583 to the ISO 202, right? And once you have the infrastructure in place, then you are needing to deal with as to how you're going to open up things for open banking, which is talking about customer trust, right? And then when you're talking about digital currency, right, you are immediately talking about really literally taking your traditional, native protocols to communicate with things like blockchain, and then you're opening up your institutions to actually communicate with a lot of third parties. You're dealing with multiple APIs that you need to support. And if you have to really do a validation or create a validation ecosystem within your organization, you're needing to actually invest on multiple platforms, and you're reliant on the intel that is needed. where actually PruTAN comes in is to actually bring the business intelligence into a single platform, right? And in order for organization to just rely on a one-stop place to actually carry through all the aspects of it, which means that you would need something to actually, like a sandbox that you could actually use to simulate your production instance within, right? Be it your acquirer or a bank, right? Whatever product systems that you're dealing with, you need to have that capability. You need to have the agentic capabilities to create data that is payment specific, not any data. You're not thinking about, okay, I'm going to employ an LLM and it's just going to generate random data. No, I mean, this has to be very specific to the financial data that we are dealing with. So when I say business intelligence, it's about the intel that we are bringing together in the form of agents to use and rely on to create the deterministic output.
One more thing that I wanted to ask you is, how are you trying to transform payments or payment risk management from a technology agenda to a boardroom agenda?
Yeah, good question. One of the things that is blindsided today for the CXOs is that most of the information that they get from the validation is engineering metrics, right? It doesn't translate, that risk into the financial posture, which is what really matters. What kind of revenue at risk, you're dealing with when a payment system fails, right? So you need what is, called as like a CXO dashboard that actually provides you a translation of all the payments validation that your organization went through, right? And then provides into some meaningful reports that actually could be used to decide, whether you want to go or hold, on a sensitive systems like payments, right? You don't want it to fail, silently, right? So most of the testing that you do today, you're basically, just testing the skeleton, and what you need to be doing is test the semantics, the business rules, right? And that can only be done by an intelligent system that comprehensively covers and understands the aspects of it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Arun.